Hello, and welcome to History Tonight. Here is your host, James Johnson. Welcome back to History Tonight. I'm your host, James Johnson. Today is a bit special because we are returning to Electron Ridge's roots, back to the world of Pokemon, to ask the question, who exactly was AZ? Now, obviously, many fans know the story of AZ, but there are also many who do not completely understand it. Now, for those of you who are unaware, AZ is the giant man that showed up in X and Y, who has been living for many thousands of years. While we do know that he has lived for about 3,000 years at least, there's more than likely several other factors that come into play here. With the fact that he could have lived a lot longer than that. Here's an interesting factor. When AZ first created the Power Flower, whatever we want to call it, the beam that shot up into the air that created Mega Evolution, obviously there were many aspects that happened there. First off, a split in time. One universe that went off and gained Mega Evolution, and one that went off and never had it. These worlds can basically be described as the multiple series that have Mega Evolution, aka X, Y, and also, I guess, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and of course the Sun and Moon games. Even if for the Sun and Moon games it's a small amount that you're going to be using Mega Evolution. But here's an interesting factor. There could possibly be way more splits than we ever thought before, but we're not going to get into that today. Instead, we're going to be focusing on who exactly was AZ. And it's rather interesting. As we know, AZ is a giant person who has lived for many thousands of years. But is it possible that he has been actually behind the scenes of many important aspects throughout all of the years? Is it possible that him living for so long, just his legend of that, would be the reason why Giovanni would start working on creating Mewtwo? Could it be possible that he once told a story of how there was much more land, or how there was much more sea, to a young Archie and a young, whoever the Magma Team leader is. I always forget what his name is. But could he have been responsible for those two learning about those stories, and then wanting to expand the sea and expand the land, so that, well, they would have more fun with their specific Pokemon? The water Pokemon for Team Aqua, and the land Pokemon for Team Magma. It's definitely possible. And then there's also that of Cyrus from the Sinnoh region. Is it possible that someone who has lived for so long actually spoke with Arceus as well as the other legendary Pokemon, and carried their legends throughout the world, sharing that story with eventually making its way to a young Cyrus? Is it also possible then that AZ is, instead of just being many years old, was for some reason actually so connected to that of Arceus that people began to assume that he was the human form of Arceus? Keep in mind that in the third movie of Pokemon, we see God creating the world using the unknown. And with this movie, we actually see that their version of God was a man. Could that have been an artist's rendition of AZ, who, again, is a giant man who just so happens to have lived for many thousands of years, and younger people who have seen multiple people die and live during the time that he has been around, is it possible that they could have connected him to Arceus due to his direct connection to him? More than likely, Arceus was rather fed up with that of AZ, and just had to deal with him because of multiple different reasons. But it's still a strange connection that could very easily have been responsible for many aspects of the Pokemon world. And even moving forward into Kalos, the different, or not Kalos, into Unova. The Unova leaders, for many generations, possibly they followed AZ. They knew that he had a friend, and that was a Pokemon, that he was so desperate to see again that he would wipe out everyone else just so that he could have his friend again. Perhaps then they would start to follow him, follow his example, trying to free all of the Pokemon, and so on and so forth, causing a lot of mayhem in the process. A misunderstanding of what has happened in his past. It's definitely a possibility. But then, what about that of Chairman Rose from the recent games? Well, could he have been inspired? Definitely a possibility. Maybe instead of when he failed to do Mega Evolution, instead, for some reason, he started looking into Infinity Energy, the energy that was responsible for Dynamax. Perhaps in one timeline, he gave up on that, realizing, no, I shouldn't go down that path. I've already failed once, I shouldn't try again and cause more destruction. Could he have been But in another, he may have been responsible for the Darkest Day, causing Pokemon to Dynamax out of nowhere just based off of his experiments. And it caused huge amounts of destruction, to which he abandoned all hope. Perhaps there is another possibility there, that instead of it being that, it could have actually been that was the option that he went with instead of Mega Evolution. Instead of going down the path that would lead to Mega Evolution, he went down the path that would lead to Dynamaxing. It's rather an interesting factor. But finally, let's go into Alola. Could he have been responsible for anything that happened within Alola? Well, as someone who has lived for many thousands of years, that has disappeared multiple times to the point where, up until X and Y, no one had heard of him. And afterwards, we haven't seen him since. But is it possible that he is the reason that Solgaleo and Lunala actually go between worlds? It's perhaps at least reasonable that when seeing their ability to travel the cosmos, he was wondering if there was a chance that they could go between universes, which, as we know, they are capable of doing. So, could he jump to another universe in which his Floette still existed? It was a possibility, and he would choose to test that possibility. In the Alola where obviously Mega Evolution exists, he would obviously be his original homeworld. The other he would go to find himself and collapse, knowing that he had failed multiple times, and he would travel to multiple of these worlds, seeing the ramifications of what he did to each of them, and that each one of these different options that he went through failed. He couldn't accomplish his mission. He couldn't bring his Floette back. It's definitely an interesting factor, because, let's just be honest, someone who is that distraught from not being able to be around their friend can do, honestly, insane things, just trying to find that one aspect, to just find them once again. And sure, in multiple universes, he could have attempted multiple different options. In others, he tried one, it failed, and he gave up. All of these different options are a possibility. Small possibilities that he just has to figure out which one could possibly be the one. But in every single one, he fails. And he stops looking. He collapses. He realizes that there is no hope. So he returns to his homeland, to Kalos, to look for some form of happiness. A place where he can finally lay his head down and just hope that things go smoothly. To spend the rest of his days trying to figure out something that he can do. It remains to be seen if that was successful, but now that he has Floette again, maybe he would realize that a lot of his efforts were simply for nothing. He should have just rested a bit, waited a bit, and he would have seen his friend once again. It remains to be seen if there is any future for our hero AZ, and if he will be someone that will change history again. But it's definitely a possibility, and it's worth looking into in the future to see what exactly could happen moving forward, and maybe one day he will find his happiness. But anyways, I have been James Johnson. You've been watching History Tonight here on Electro Ninjas Lab. I will see you guys